Welcome, everyone. It is Saturday, January the 30th, 2021. It is currently 11:28 a.m. Central Time, and I'm still here at Victory Baptist Church, located here in Ovalo, Texas. Now, I just saw a news report pop up on my iPad. I immediately clicked on it. Then I started grabbing the artwork, grabbed the audio, and I want to bring this to your attention. There's a couple of things here I want to bring to your attention, but let me try to set up a kind of a perspective that I'm trying to still flesh out. I'm still trying to develop. So I'm going to try to give you this kind of perspective, and then we'll get into this information that I have for you. I've got an audio clip, and then I've got an information about a program that's going to be airing on television this evening. I think at 8 p.m. Central Time. I believe at 8 p.m. Central Time, and I'll give you that information in case it's something you want to watch. All right. We all know that at least on this program, I have talked a lot about the QAnon conspiracy theory. I started warning about the QAnon conspiracy theory. It feels like years ago. I don't know how. I would have to go back and try to find the first time I mentioned the QAnon conspiracy theory. I just know when I first started mentioning it, a lot of people didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And basically, I got some messages of, why do you even care? Just some stupid conspiracy theory. Yeah, when the people told me, why do I care? And it's just some stupid conspiracy theory that's not going to mean anything. Those people never emailed me back to go, well, maybe you were onto something. Okay. I never get those emails going, hey, when I told you were an idiot for talking about that, they never come back and say, maybe you were right. Maybe you were right. Maybe that was a big deal. I just felt the QAnon conspiracy theory was a danger. And again, let me make it very clear. I believed it was a danger because of how it was infiltrating Christians, the church. Christians started buying into it. Christians started taking things that came straight out of the QAnon conspiracy theory, even if they didn't realize it was coming from the QAnon conspiracy theory. They were taking this information and it was showing up in pulpits. And then you had churches taking Q drops, messages from Q, and basically using them as prophecy and expounding them from the pulpit. That's scary, frightening stuff when you see a conspiracy theory that is specifically targeted and coming at the church and Christianity. That's when pastors have to step up and say, hey, this is happening. And you can't, look, as a pastor, you've got to speak against these conspiracy theories, especially when you know people in your church are vulnerable to them, or especially if you know they're sharing and buying into them. You have a responsibility. Now, yeah, you may offend people. And yes, sadly, once you start speaking against things people don't like, they just pack up and they just go to another church. I hate that. Many Christians are unwilling to stay. As soon as the church says something they don't like, they just go find another church or they just start their own. We could talk about that problem. But yeah, I was concerned. And let me make it very, very clear. My major issue with QAnon conspiracy theory, first and foremost, is its infiltration into the church and Christians buying into many of the concepts and ideas put out by the QAnon conspiracy theory and somehow trying to mix it with their Christianity. That's frightening. That should not be tolerated. Right? And then another issue. So there's the QAnon situation. And then another issue is Christian nationalism, which I have warned about as well. And lo and behold, I think my warning about Christian nationalism also turned out to be pretty spot on. In fact, right now, just look at this. I'll just show you. This is interesting the way this shows up. If you just go right now to Google, I think you can do this for yourself. Okay, what did I see here? If you just type in Christian news, Christian news, type that in Google and well, you could, if you're listening to me live, you can chat. If you're using the Spreaker app, you can hit the little chat icon and you can chat with me right there. And you could tell me what you find. But if you type in Christian news in Google right now, the first thing that will show up will be an ad for the prophecynewswatch.com. All right. And then right underneath that, it says top stories. Here are the two big top stories right now that shows up on Google when you type in Christian news. From the New York Times, the Capitol insurrection was as Christian nationalist as it gets. Second, Christianity on display at Capitol riot sparks new debate. Now, immediately, Christian nationalism is in the news, and it's being blamed for what happened at the Capitol. So I did an episode a few days ago about, is Christian nationalism going to basically become the new witch hunt? Is there going to go now this hunt to go after Christian nationalism? Now, listen, I think what is happening right now is there's a major turn against, obviously, Christian nationalism, because they believe that was part of the insurrection, led to the insurrection. Whether you agree or disagree, Christian nationalism is being blamed, and right along with that, QAnon is being blamed, because clearly QAnon had a presence in that whole thing, and QAnon followers had a presence in that entire situation that occurred at the Capitol on January the 6th. So here's my concern. If they link QAnon with Christianity, Christian nationalism also with Christianity, then guess what? That puts us in a very vulnerable perspective. All of us who claim to be Christians, to be viewed with suspicion that, oh, I bet you're one of those QAnon people. Oh, I bet you're one of those Christian nationalist people. Oh, I bet you believe in violence and trying to overthrow the government. I bet you believe in all of that nonsense. We are going to get grouped with them. Now you say, well, that's not fair. That's not right. Let me remind you of what many Christians did after the September the 11th attacks that occurred here in the United States of America, September the 11th, 2001. The 9/11 attacks. Many Christians then wanted to argue that Muslims could not build a mosque in their community or their neighborhood because Islam were terrorists. And we just labeled everyone there. Now you can say, well, Islam has a more troubling history. I understand that, but we wanted to deny people's religious liberty. We wanted to take away religious freedom because we viewed them as a threat. Well, now the world can say Christians are that threat. Christians are the terrorist. Christians are the ones who promote false conspiracy theories that led people to riot and invade the Capitol building, and 5 people died. This is I continue to warn you, this is a troubling development, right? And we have to be on the lookout for this. And here's my fear. If one more violent act occurs, I don't care if it's a shooting, a bombing, if anything like that happens, and it can be traced back to basically Christian nationalists, QAnon, anything, even just far right-wing conservative type political viewpoint, I think it's going to be used to try to silence Christians, not the Christians that you think may need to be silenced. These professing Christians or Christian nationalists may be calling for violence. I'm talking the average Christian. The average Christian, I think, is going to find themselves trying to be silenced. And we're going to have to be on the lookout for this. We're going to have to be on the lookout for this. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. I think it's going to require one more event, and I think we're going to find ourselves going, wait a minute. They're trying to shut down my podcast. Wait, they're trying to shut down your social media account. I think then we're going to be in trouble. So we have to continue to watch what is being said about Christian nationalism. Again, just type in Christian news. I mean, it's crazy. Just type in Christian news in Google, and the top stories are the Capitol insurrection was as Christian nationalist as it gets. And then it shows a person in front of the Capitol building holding a cross. Like, you don't see the concern there? Because I'm a Christian. I'm not a Christian nationalist. I condemn Christian nationalism, but will the people in the world draw that distinction? All right? Christianity on display at the Capitol. And then it shows a person in front of the Capitol, and it looks like they're holding a Bible. It looks like they're holding a Bible. Right? And they're like, hey, look at this. And they're like, sparks a new debate. And this is from the Associated Press. Let me open this story really quick. This wasn't the original direction I want to go, but I'm trying to remind you of this kind of perspective that I'm developing, this kind of idea that I'm developing. I don't have it all completely figured out yet. Yes, this person is holding a Bible. It says, the Christian imagery and rhetoric on view during this month's Capitol insurrection are sparking renewed debate about the societal effects of melding Christian faith with an exclusionary breed of nationalism. Please note, so this idea of people meddling Christian faith with nationalism. Now, here's the problem. anytime you now speak about things going on in the culture, you could be said, look, that's Christian nationalism. You're one of those Christian nationalists. No, I just believe abortion is wrong. You're a Christian nationalist. I believe homosexuality is a sin. You're a Christian nationalist. Whoa, wait a minute. No, you don't understand. No. And that is the potential for trouble. And you could say that the Christian nationalism that I warned against, the political hijacking of the church, is now going to put us in a position that makes us vulnerable for persecution. And the persecution is not coming because they hate Christ. Persecution is going to come because they hate the use of faith the use of faith in politics and try to force upon them a political view. They disagree with the political viewpoint, but people trying to use their faith to justify that political viewpoint being imposed on everyone else. It's going to be more against the politics than our faith. And that is something that I tried to warn everyone about. But here we are. So I believe that right now what's happening is the concern about QAnon, the concern about Christian nationalism it's going to almost turn into this kind of a witch hunt, at least temporarily. And then Christianity is going to kind of be lumped into this because Christians are to blame because of their use of QAnon and their use of basically Christian nationalist ideology. We're going to be viewed as suspect and possibly try to be silenced. I think that could possibly go away quickly if no other acts of violence occur. But one more, it could just be some individual out there who connects Christianity with their viewpoints on social media or wherever. And next thing you know, they do a mass shooting. I'm telling you, it's going to be on, and it's not going to be pretty. That is my concern, and so I want to once again restate that position. And then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to play this news article because this morning, NPR, what are they talking about? QAnon. They're talking about QAnon, and they're trying to figure out, so what's going to happen to the QAnon people? Where are they going to go? And tonight at, I believe, 8, in fact, let me see if I have it here. I'll go ahead and give you this because I'm just showing you that the world's not letting this go right now because they believe that this is a threat. They believe this is a threat. Here we go. A former QAnon supporter apologizes. So here's a former QAnon supporter, I guess, finally woke up and realized what they had found themselves into. But tonight, CNN is going to do a special report called Inside the QAnon Conspiracy. It's going to air tonight, January the 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That'll be 8 p.m. Central Time. So there you have it. On CNN tonight, prime time, they're going to be doing a special report on the QAnon conspiracy theory. Now, I know what you're saying. I don't care. It's CNN. It's fake news. You may want to watch it just to see if they link it in any way, shape, or form to Christianity. That is the concern. That is what you got to pay attention to. If it's connected to Christianity, then you and your church and my Christian podcast, we kind of get lumped over there with that. And I don't want to be, look, I've spoken against the QAnon conspiracy theory. It will continue. I wish the whole thing would just collapse and everybody would move on. Sadly, they'll just move on to another conspiracy theory because that's the way it works. They're already trying to revamp their theory. We're going to hear some discussion about that in a minute. And Christian nationalism. They're going to lump us with Christian nationalists, and we've got to do everything in our power to assure that that is not us. That's not Christianity. It's not biblical, and it's definitely nothing that we support or agree with. But we're all going to be kind of grouped together, and that is dangerous. We're in a very vulnerable position. I'm hoping nothing happens. Hoping no more acts of violence. One, because I just don't want anyone to get hurt and anyone to get killed. So that's first and foremost. You want life, which is sacred, and we believe in the sanctity of life. We don't want anyone to lose their life. We don't want any acts of violence. But then secondly, because of the repercussions that I think would come upon Christianity. I think we're in a vulnerable position. We may move past it. So I'm not being dogmatic with my predictions, but I just keep seeing these kinds of, I'm like, you type in Christian news and the first thing that pops up is a news story about basically, hey, Christian nationalists, that's what led to the insurrection. And you're like, well, wait a minute. wait a minute. And just remember, when they talk about Christian nationalists, they usually connect it with white evangelicalism. Well, I'm white, and I do not like the term evangelical, so we don't have that term. We are Baptist. We're independent because we do not belong to a denomination. And I use the word fundamental because I believe in the fundamentals of the faith. So now some people will try to connect us with the typical IFB, Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, and we don't fit in there as well. But I would definitely, I'm fundamentalist in the sense that I hold to the fundamentals of the faith. And you could look at our study of the Niagara Bible Creed, the Fundamentals, the book that was put out 1900s that I've talked about so much before. So, that's the fundamentals of the faith is what I'm referring to. The fundamentals of the faith and the Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed. Yeah, some of those basic understandings of Christianity. So I don't like the term evangelical for a lot of reasons. But especially now, because now if you're white and you're evangelical, you're viewed as a Trump-supporting, QAnon conspiracy theory believing, person ready to rush the Capitol building and kill people. That's not what you want to be identified as. So, but again, Christianity, I want to make it very clear, Christianity created much of this problem, or I shouldn't say Christianity. Many within Christianity created this problem. And I would point to American Family Radio having a discussion, 2 days after the Capitol riots about taking up arms on Christian radio. The 1 o'clock program that comes on American Family Radio, 1 o'clock in the afternoon Central Time on American Family Radio. That thing has promoted more crazy, whacked out, wrong, misguided information than I've ever heard. And that's on Christian radio. And it's all this political hijack, pro-Trump, basically QAnon. Even though they don't say QAnon, they're borrowing some of the same concepts from it. And then here in the local area on Saturday mornings on the talk radio station, everything I think it's called Sovereign Radio. And it comes across like Christian, right? They do little devotional. They talk about Bible. They talk about God. You listen to that thing. It's QAnon over the top nonsense. So because Christians have bought into this, now they've brought this shame upon Christianity at large. And the churches who didn't speak against these things, they're to blame. Because they were like, well, we don't want to speak against that. We don't want to speak against that because we've got to get a political victory. No, what you should have been worrying about is the gospel of Jesus Christ. But that's a whole different story. So that's my concern. So this morning, NPR, they did another story about QAnon. Tonight, CNN is going to be doing a thing about QAnon. Let's listen to the NPR report and just see if there's anything here that we need to discuss or pay attention to. Let's listen carefully. Here we go.
After the attack on the U.S. Capitol, Twitter and Facebook got a lot more aggressive in trying to crack down on the baseless conspiracy theory known as QAnon. Just 2 weeks later, Joe Biden was inaugurated president, and that stunned those who had bought into QAnon's fantastical false promises. They believed, among other things, that Donald Trump would stay in office for another term and that he would arrest and execute his political enemies. NPR tech correspondent Shannon Bond looks at where QAnon has gone now.
QAnon has 2 stars. There's Q, the mysterious figure who spins evidence-free tales about a satanic cabal of pedophiles in government and Hollywood. And there's former President Donald Trump, who was supposed to expose and defeat that cabal. Now both have disappeared from social media.
There's no one cohesive narrative that's really emerged yet. And I pinned that on Q not really having a leader right now.
Researcher Mike Rothschild is working on a book about QAnon. Whoever Q is, the account has pretty much stopped posting since the election. And Trump was kicked off Twitter, Facebook, and Google's YouTube this month after urging his supporters to go to the Capitol. I should note Facebook and Google are financial sponsors of NPR. At the Capitol, some rioters openly expressed support for QAnon.
Jacob Chansley, also known as the QAnon shaman, he faces multiple felony and misdemeanor charges for his alleged role in the storming of the Capitol.
It's hard to quantify just how big QAnon is. When NPR and Ipsos polled people about QAnon beliefs in December, more than half said they were either true or that they weren't sure. After the insurrection, Twitter banned 70,000 accounts spreading the conspiracy. Some were influencers with large followings, so removing them is having an impact, says Melanie Smith of the research firm Graphica.
Which means that there isn't one central place that people are finding information in terms of influential accounts, and it's kind of become more disparate.
That makes it harder for harmful, even violent ideas to gain traction, and less likely that unsuspecting Twitter users will stumble across them.
The kind of deplatforming and what does success look like for me is about not exposing new communities to that type of content. So in my mind, that's a pretty big success.
But Smith and other researchers warn there's a cost to that success. As QAnon influencers and their followers are pushed off mainstream platforms, some are migrating to apps with fewer rules, like the alternative social network Gab and the messaging app Telegram. There, they may be exposed to more extremist content, like white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups.
What they're essentially doing is walking straight into an incubator for radicalization.
Jared Holt studies disinformation and extremism at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. He says QAnon is already incorporating new, unfounded theories from other extremists. Some accounts are latching on to obscure legal fictions promoted by sovereign citizen groups, which deny the legitimacy of the U.S. government, like the bogus idea that Trump will be inaugurated on March 4th.
The adoption of sovereign citizen style ideas is just another example of something that QAnon has done repeatedly, if not constantly, which is crowdsourcing their idea of reality.
QAnon's constant evolution is a challenge for platforms like Twitter and Facebook that have banned the movement to stamp out its latest theories and hashtags. But there are QAnon podcasts. Some Republicans in Congress have expressed sympathy for these beliefs. And QAnon adherents find defenders in conservative media. Researcher Mike Rothschild says that's a bigger problem than the platforms can solve.
When you've got people like Tucker Carlson or sitting members of the House of Representatives talking about something, it's hard to ban it.
At this point, he says, it's inconceivable that QAnon will disappear. Shannon Bond, NPR News.
Okay, now, they didn't necessarily connect it to Christianity, which is a good thing, but here's what I want you to pay attention to. Please note how many accounts, they said, 70,000 accounts were removed from social media, right? Because they're connected to QAnon. So if you are connected to QAnon, you're going to get silenced. You're going to get shut down. If Christianity is connected to it in any way, shape, or form, or appears to be connected to it, it's going to be shut down. And again, you're not being persecuted for your Christianity. You're persecuted for your wild, crazy conspiracy theories. Now, I get very nervous for platforms shutting things down and quote unquote censoring things. But at the same time, let's just be fair. Again, I just always use this as an example. Sermon Audio is a good example. If you want to be on Sermon Audio, you have to agree to their rules. You have to agree to their statement of faith, and they can remove you whenever they want, even if you've not necessarily violated their rules or their statement of faith. I go back to the time when I was on Sermon Audio, and we had a big program called News and Focus, and far more numbers than I ever have, today. And there was an individual on there who was conspiracy theory central, man. Crazy conspiracy theories about, you're being chipped, the flu vaccine's trying to kill you, all these crazy things. And ultimately, Sermon Audio just booted him, gave me a week and said, you're gone. You got 1 week and you're done. So you better get all of your content. And they kicked him off. Why? Well, because they didn't like his content. I got kicked off Christian radio station because they didn't like my content. So that is what lots of people do this. So I don't like when anyone silences a voice. I don't like it, but I can understand it. But the point is, as Christians, if they're deplatforming that many people and Christianity gets linked to these things, that's when it becomes possibly dangerous. Again, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. But so we have to be on the lookout for that. There's a second thing, right? So there's the first thing. They didn't link it, but all of this silencing and shutting things down, it's going to have an impact. I've got an article right here. About Twitter suspending a Christian magazine. Christian magazine has been suspended from Twitter, and unless they remove a certain post, they're not going to be allowed back on there. I've got another article, I think, do I have it, of a professor on Facebook who's been booted. So there's already some things starting to happen, and we're going to have to pay close attention to it. But here's the second thing. This is what the church needs to pay close attention to. Listen to me carefully. Those within the QAnon conspiracy world, those who bought into the conspiracy theory and promoted it, even if QAnon collapses, they're going to take elements of it, and new conspiratorial thinking, new ideas will formulate, and guess what? They will be brought into the church. Those who are Christian QAnon conspiracy theorists, if QAnon completely collapses because there's no specific, Q doesn't seem to be dropping any more new information, and if Q just stops and QAnon kind of starts going away, something will replace it. Now, what you hope is you could get those Christians to repent of their QAnon garbage, renounce it, move away from all conspiratorial thinking, and get back to the scriptures. Get back to being a Christian and not a conspiracy theorist. Get back to being a Christian. That's the C. Christian, Christ, not conspiracy. That's what we need to get people back to. But in many cases, that's not going to happen. They're just going to just find new conspiracy theories, new crazy way of thinking, and then we'll have to be on the lookout for it because something new will start emerging, this new big conspiracy theory that will become kind of bringing in some QAnon ideas. They'll bring in some new ideas, and you have to see if this new one, whatever this new one's going to be, I can guarantee you a new one will form. I don't know at what point, but when it begins to form, listen to me carefully, we want to look and see how much of it is trying to mix in Christianity with it. How much of it is infiltrating the church? How many Christians are buying into it? We got to be on the lookout for it. And Christians have to repudiate this nonsense and stop it. Right? I'm telling you, there's something will start developing, and it's because I think the QAnon situation, they're saying it's not going to go away. I think it won't go away. It's going to evolve. It's going to transition into something different. I'm just curious how whatever arises, how much of it is going to try to merge Christianity with it. How much is it going? How much will it infiltrate the church? That is what we need to be on the lookout for. We got to be on the lookout for Christianity just being linked with QAnon, and therefore your voice is silenced. We've got to and same with Christian nationalism, and we've got to be on the lookout for whatever new thing is about to emerge, and we've got to be able to recognize it, expose it, and condemn it. All right? So those are some thoughts, just trying to get you prepared and equipped to deal with the ever-changing world that we are living in. And we've got some issues to really be on the lookout for. All right, you can give me your thoughts about all of this by emailing me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day. God bless.